and tell how he had found it on the body of him who had fallen from the cliff. There was no mistaking it, for there were the 7 fingers which I had noted before. This man must have wrenched it off the dead body whilst his chief and I were otherwise engaged; and from the awe of the others I doubted not that he had hoped to use it as an amulet or charm. Whereas, if powers it had, they were not for him who had taken it from the dead, since his death followed hard upon his theft. Already his amulet had had an awesome baptism, for the wrist of the dead hand was stained with red as though it had been dipped in recent blood. That night I was in certain fear lest there should be some violence done to me, for if the poor dead hand was so valued as a charm, what must be the worth in such wise of the rare jewel which it had guarded? Though only the chief knew of it, my doubt was perhaps even greater, for he could so order matters as to have me at his mercy when he would. I guarded myself, therefore, with wakefulness so well as I could, determined that at my earliest opportunity I should leave this party and complete my journeying home, first to the Nile bank, and then down its course to Alexandria, with other guides who knew not what strange matters I had with me. At last there came over me a disposition of sleep, so potent that I felt it would be resistless. Fearing attack, or that being searched in my sleep, the Bedouin might find the Star Jewel which he had seen me place with others in my dress, I took it out unobserved and held it in my hand. It seemed to give back the light of the flickering fire and the light of the stars, for there was no moon, with equal fidelity; and I could note that on its reverse it was graven deeply with certain signs such as I had seen in the tomb. As I sank into the unconsciousness of sleep, the graven Star Jewel was hidden in the hollow of my clenched hand. I waked out of sleep with the light of the morning sun on my face. I sat up and looked around me. The fire was out, and the camp was desolate, save for one figure which lay prone close to me. It was that of the Arab chief, who lay on his back, dead. His face was almost black, and his eyes were open and staring horribly up at the sky, as though he saw there some dreadful vision. He had evidently been strangled, for on looking I found on his throat the red marks where fingers had pressed. There seemed so many of these marks that I counted them. There were 7, and all parallel, except the thumb mark, as though made with one hand. This thrilled me as I thought of the mummy hand with the 7 fingers. Even there, in the open desert, it seemed as if there could be enchantments. In my surprise, as I bent over him, I opened my right hand, which up to now I had held shut with the feeling, instinctive even in sleep, of keeping safe that which it held. As I did so, the Star Jewel held there fell out and struck the dead man on the mouth. Mirabile dictu there came forth at once from the dead mouth a great gush of blood, in which the red jewel was for the moment lost. I turned the dead man over to look for it, and found that he lay with his right hand bent under him as though he had fallen on it, and in it he held a great knife, keen of point and edge, such as Arabs carry at the belt. It may have been that he was about to murder me when vengeance came on him, whether from man or God, or the gods of old, I know not. Suffice it that when I found my ruby jewel, which shone up as a living star from the mess of blood wherein it lay, I paused not, but fled from the place. I journeyed on alone through the hot desert, till by God's grace I came upon an Arab tribe camping by a well, who gave me salt. With them I rested till they had set me on my way. I know not what became of the mummy hand, or of those who had it. What strife, or suspicion, or disaster, or greed went with it, I know not; but some such cause there must have been, since those who had it fled with it. It doubtless is used as a charm of potence by some desert tribe. At the earliest opportunity I made examination of the star ruby, as I wished to try to understand what was graven on it. The symbols, whose meaning, however, I could not understand, were as follows. Twice, whilst I had been reading this engrossing narrative, I thought that I had seen across the page streaks of shade, which the weirdness of the subject had made to seem like the shadow of a hand. On the first of these occasions I found that the illusion came from the fringe of green silk around the lamp; but on the second I had looked up, and my eyes had lit on the mummy hand across the room on which the starlight was falling under the edge of the blind. It was of little wonder that I had connected it with such a narrative, for if my eyes told me truly, here, in this room with me, was the very hand of which the traveller Van Huyn had written. I looked over at the bed, and it comforted me to think that the nurse still sat there, calm and wakeful. At such a time, with such surrounds, during such a narrative, it was well to have assurance of the presence of some living person. I sat looking at the book on the table before me, and so many strange thoughts crowded on me that my mind began to whirl. It was almost as if the light on the white fingers in front of me was beginning to have some hypnotic effect. All at once all thoughts seemed to stop, and for an instant the world and time stood still. There lay a real hand across the book. What was there to so overcome me, as was the case? I knew the hand that I saw in the book, and loved it. Margaret Trelawny's hand was a joy to me to see, to touch, and yet, at that moment, coming after other marvellous things, it had a strangely moving effect on me. It was but momentary, however, and had passed even before her voice had reached me. "What disturbs you? What are you staring at the book for? I thought for an instant that you must have been overcome again." I jumped up. "I was reading," I said, "an old book from the library." As I spoke I closed it and put it under my arm. "I shall now put it back, as I understand that your father wishes all things, especially books, kept in their proper places." My words were intentionally misleading, for I did not wish her to know what I was reading, and thought it best not to wake her curiosity by leaving the book about. I went away, but not to the library. I left my book in my room, where I could get it when I had had my sleep in the day. When I returned, Nurse Kennedy was ready to go to bed, so Miss Trelawny watched with me in the room. I did not want any book whilst she was present. We sat close together and talked in a whisper whilst the moments flew by. It was with surprise that I noted the edge of the curtains changing from grey to yellow light. What we talked of had nothing to do with the sick man, except in so far that all which concerned his daughter must ultimately concern him; but it had nothing to say to Egypt, or mummies, or the dead, or caves, or Bedouin chiefs. I could well take note in the growing light that Margaret's hand had not 7 fingers, but 5, for it lay in mine. When Doctor Winchester arrived in the morning and had made his visit to his patient, he came to see me as I sat in the dining room having a little meal, breakfast or supper, I hardly knew which it was, before I went to lie down. Mr. Corbeck came in at the same time, and we resumed our conversation where we had left it the night before. I told Mr. Corbeck that I had read the chapter about the finding of the tomb, and that I thought Doctor Winchester should read it too. The latter said that if he might he would take it with him; he had that morning to make a railway journey to Ipswich, and would read it on the train. He said he would bring it back with him when he came again in the evening. I went up to my room to bring it down, but I could not find it anywhere. I had a distinct recollection of having left it on the little table beside my bed when I had come up after Mr.